First and foremost, I'd like to give everyone a really warm welcome to the 6th annual AWS Alumni Panel Discussion. I will be moderating the panel conversation tonight, and I'm just really honored to be a part of this event. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and then we can introduce tonight's panelists. So my name is Kayla Siz. I'm also an alum of Aurora Waldorf myself. I graduated in 2005. I went to Springville High School following that, and then to UB, and completed a bachelor's degree in community mental health while I was there, and English. And then several years later, I decided to go back to school for a master's in clinical social work, which is what I'm doing now. So I live in Western New York, and I'm a holistic psychotherapist, and I work at a small group therapy practice here in Buffalo. I'm also currently the secretary on the board of trustees here at AWS, which has been really nice and wonderful to just get connected with the school again and be a part of this community. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to do tonight, the first half of tonight's event is going to be a panel discussion with some questions that I've prepared for these wonderful panelists. And then the second half of the event will be an open sort of Q&A where everyone is welcome to ask their questions of the panelists. You know, whether you have questions about the adjustment to high school or higher education, adulthood, the workforce, or even if you just have some questions about their takeaways from Waldorf education, you can feel free to ask those tonight. So now I'd like to just have tonight's wonderful panelists introduce themselves. So why don't you three just share a little bit about yourselves and what you've been up to since graduating from AWS. Let's see, Lucas, why don't you kick us off?
All right. Thank you for having me, everyone. So my name is Lucas. I graduated from Waldorf in 2016, where I then went on to Canisius High School. I spent 4 years on the cross country and track team there, which was a big part of my life. During high school, I was able to set a personal record of 4 minutes and 18 seconds in the mile while I was at Canisius. And then went on to Boston College, where I continued running there, middle distance, and where I am now as a junior at Boston College. So I'm majoring in political science there. And I'm continuing my service, which kind of started for me in high school, leading retreats and going on service trips. Most recently, I was able to go on a service trip in El Salvador. And that's been a big part of my life leading into now, where I've been able to co-found a nonprofit, which is providing bikes to kids across the United States. And we're biking cross country while we do it. So really focusing on youth mental wellness, independence, and making these experiences that are sometimes inaccessible outside, more accessible to individuals growing up in the city. So I grew up in Colden, just a stone away from Waldorf. So I spent a lot of time at Kissing Bridge in the winter, especially. Ski club on Thursday was a fond memory of mine. And this past winter, I spent about a month living in Breckenridge, working and skiing, kind of living the dream. And that was awesome for me. And after college, I hope to continue building cycle service and see where that venture can go.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Lucas.
Thank you.
Fiona, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Fiona Murphy. I graduated Waldorf almost 3 years ago in 2020. So my 8th grade year was the year that COVID began. So that was kind of cut short, unfortunately. I currently am a junior at Buffalo Seminary with a local private high school. So I went there directly after Waldorf. I'm going to graduate next year and see where that takes me. As of right now, I'm also very into cross country, just like Lucas. That is a sport I started. Honestly, my passion from that grew from Waldorf's like sports in middle school. Uh, that's what drove me to it. I'm also doing track uh, as a distance runner, so that's a pretty big part of who I am today. Um, from Waldorf, I drew a lot of just skills that I have, like learning all of the things have really helped me in high school, like artistically. I'm leagues ahead of everyone else, and that's amazing. Uh, as of where I grew up in Buffalo, so not very close to Waldorf. I would take the Buffalo bus every morning and evening, and it would be a long ride, but it was nice because I got to spend that time with friends. Um, I just have so many fond memories of Waldorf. It was really a great way to grow up, and having all the outdoors time and those experiences have definitely shaped me to be able to handle the stress of high school and like the rigorous courses. So, as of right now, I'm in the process of applying to colleges, but I don't have a direct plan of where that's going to go yet. Um, Graduating from Waldorf in 2020 was a shock to say the least. With the state of the world, I didn't exactly know what was going to happen, but it was nice to get to see like my friends who I had grown up with since we'd started at Waldorf, which was in first grade. I graduated with most of the kids who were in that class. And I'm just really thankful for the years that I got to spend there. And yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona. Simon?
Yeah, hello everyone. Simon Kuntz. I honestly can't remember what year I graduated. A couple years after Kayla here. So I think probably around maybe 2010. I'm 28, and I after I was in Waldorf from 5th to 8th grade. I was at a public school before then, and my mom and dad both said that I really didn't like public school, which I also remember. I guess I came back, crying a lot of times from public school, saying that I didn't like the coursework. I didn't really like, all the cliques in the public school and things like that. And I went over to Waldorf. I was there from 5th to 8th grade, and I loved my experience, which I'll tell you more about shortly. But after I graduated from Waldorf in 8th grade, I went to a public high school in East Aurora. I grew up in East Aurora, New York, and then I went to actually a few different colleges, but I studied computer science, and then I got a job in like computer programming and software consulting. My wife actually is a software engineer herself. She also went to school for computer science. I met her in Boston and lived there for a few years, actually where Lucas is living now, and then most recently moved back to the East Aurora, Western New York area about a year and a half ago. So that's a bit about myself, but I love what I do for work, and then outside of work, I do skiing, snowboarding. I can ride a unicycle, and a lot of those skills I learned while I was in Waldorf from my friend Sean Phillips, if anyone here knows the Phillips family. But yeah, I most of my friends are maintained from Waldorf. My really close friends, the DePasquales, Arlo and Roman DePasquale. I see them all the time. And yeah, I built a lot of great friendships. And actually this weekend, when I had some friends visiting from out of town, we went to Chestnut Ridge, and I ran into Mr. Heasel, who was my teacher in Waldorf.
Gosh.
That I have not seen Mr. Heasel since, honestly, since before high school. So when I was at Waldorf, I had not seen him in high school, or maybe the freshman year. So it's been a solid over a decade since I saw him, but I recognized him when I walked by him and got a photo with him, and it was really great to see him.
Nice.
And then additionally, outside of work, I do woodworking. and that's my big hobby of mine. I collect watches, and recently actually sewed my own little watch pillows to put a watch on. So Lisa, you might like to hear that. But yeah, I just really valued my time at Waldorf, and I'm glad to meet everyone here, and I'll be glad to tell everyone more about it.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, you three, for introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit about what you've been up to. It sounds like all three of you are just like doing some really incredible things. And yeah, it's really, really wonderful to hear about all of that. So I'm going to kind of dive into some of our prepared questions. Now, we likely won't get to all of them, and that's okay. But I think the first one that I'd like to start with, I was actually a panelist a few years ago, and Brooke McAdam was the moderator, and she asked this sort of opening question that I thought was really great. So I stole that from her. Thanks, Brooke. But I thought it was just kind of like an interesting question to get us started. So the question is, how would you describe, or how do you describe where you went to school to someone who has maybe never heard of Waldorf education before?
I can start off.
Great.
So I think if someone had never heard of Waldorf before, I think I would describe it as an eccentric approach to learning through natural development. I think Waldorf is very unique in the way that it's an intentional and how it intertwines nature within its curriculum. And I think the second thing that makes the Waldorf curriculum really unique is that it kind of it showcases how each child is naturally creative, and instead of dampening that creativity that's natural within a child, it focuses on bringing out that creativity. I think anyone can learn how to write a college essay or how to format a bibliography in time, but one of the things that can be much more difficult to learn later down the road is how to cultivate your creativity. And for me, at least, I found the Waldorf education to really bring out the sense of creativity within myself. So I think that was really the hallmark of the Waldorf education for me.
Nice. Thank you. Fiona or Simon, do either of you have, a way that you describe where you went to school, for someone who's maybe never heard of it before?
I can go next. So my way of describing Waldorf is not quite as eloquent as Lucas's. I've had to describe it to numerous people, and I tend to start with that it's a small school in East Aurora. And like when I tell people that, most people have never heard of it, which I think is a shame because it could help a lot of kids. I also talk about its basis in like creativity and allowing kids to be outdoors, which I think is it's a great thing, and it's something that's just unique to Waldorf. I don't know any other schools that are like that. Along with that, I also mention how it focuses on art, which is something that a lot of schools don't allow their students to do. And that helps kids who might not be as gifted naturally to explore that as a creative outlet and a way to learn in a sort of a way that's not really taught anymore.
Yeah, I think my experience with Waldorf, it's definitely a very different school. I went to public schools, and I went to a public school from, before 5th grade, and Waldorf really, it is very much a school with nature and outdoors. That's honestly, I think, a thread that a lot of people are going to remember from Waldorf, is that you spend a lot of time outside. But the curriculum is learned outside. Your coursework could be outside. You could sit in a field with a lot of your classmates and reflect on one of the lessons that you had in the room. So I think it, like, one key difference is public schools are very, very structured, and there is certainly structure in Waldorf. There's, lesson plans and everything. There's different, class times and everything like that, and things to accomplish, but the approach to get there is really different. So, I remember, yeah, being out in, in a field. It's very, how does it make you feel, reflecting on different things that you might enjoy. You learn and hear from, like, a lot of your classmates, their perspectives. I think it's really collaborative. It's very kind of family and friend based. I mean, I don't know if it's changed, but since I went to Waldorf, you have one set of classmates and you really are with those classmates throughout all the years. So you're going to have, different genders, different points of view. You're going to have people who are introverted, people who are extroverted, some people who like talking, who don't like talking, people with all different, and I think it kind of teaches you to be an individual and to learn, kind of adapt yourself with all of that more. I think people who go to the Waldorf School are just really well-rounded. The coursework is, you do a lot of gymnastics and, exercise and spend time outdoors. Then you're also indoors. You learn a lot of different things. There's, eurythmy, band, woodworking, sewing, lots of different, like, skills as an individual that you're not going to learn at a public school. So I personally think that was really valuable. And that's kind of how I would describe it too. It's a very hard school to describe to other people, but I think it prepares you really well. And also in, today's day and age, a lot of people don't have the attention span anymore, that I think you can have, and just can be a more compassionate individual from going to Waldorf, and yeah, more well-rounded.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of hear all three of you reflect on this, like, through line of nature and the natural aspects. And I think that would be integrated in any Waldorf school. Although, I think at Aurora Waldorf School, we have such a unique advantage of the campus with the creek and, the woods and the fields and the meadows and all of the, athletic, diamonds and spaces for games and so much stuff. I mean, the campus is really yields itself very well to the philosophy and learnings, that are integrated into Waldorf. Great. So let's move on to the next question. I think we've already heard about some reflections, things that all three of you have really appreciated through your time at AWS. But I'd love for a moment to just get a little bit more specific and ask, when each of you think back on your time at Aurora Waldorf School, are there any particular experiences or lessons that you feel prepared you well for high school or college? Now, these could be very small and specific, experiences or subjects or lessons that you have. Simon, are you interested in picking us up?
Yeah, definitely. From my perspective, I think, like, the biggest thing that it really prepared me for with high school and onward in college and everything is, when I went back to high school after the time I spent in Waldorf, I didn't feel like I needed to conform to any sort of, like, clique, so to speak. Like, there's what you'd call the jocks, or the people who are very into sports, and then people who might be really into this sort of thing, or, maybe you have your more quote unquote trouble, crowd or whatever have you. And, like, I felt like I could do cross country. I could also do skateboarding. I could also do, I could hang out with all sorts of types of people. Some of my friends, a lot of my friends were just very different from each other. I have a twin sister, Megan, and I ended up becoming friends with a lot of her friends. Yeah, just a lot of different types of people. Like, I think I felt very comfortable as a person, just moving over to high school. I was comfortable in the classes. I didn't feel like I needed to. I think I had a lot more self-confidence, self-esteem that I don't think would have been built out if I didn't have Waldorf, because Waldorf's really showing you and teaching you that, like, you're important, that you have great creativity, that you belong, you learn that like, oh, I can get along with a lot of these people. It kind of forces you to get along with, different people in different circumstances. And I think just a lot of that exposure really helps. Then when I transitioned into high school, I just felt more prepared to take on the world. And honestly, high school felt very easy. I think after that, maybe
Mm.
because to some of the points that people have talked about already, it's like the coursework is actually really, really easy. Like coursework and remembering dates and things like that's very easy. But just as an example, right? For like history, my favorite subject's math, but history I've never been good at. In history personally, when I took history in high school, it was a bit more challenging for me because a lot of it is like remembering dates and people and things like that. That's like the public school approach. What I remember from Waldorf was more story driven. So I remember more stories from Mr. Heasel in particular on, this is like Romulus and Remus when they were brothers that fought over Rome. And like I remember Mesopotamia and all this storytelling that Mr. Heasel did. But I'm a consultant right now, and a huge part of my job is storytelling. I work with a lot of like executives in the business field, and so you really need to be creative, and you need to, be, I would say, you need to be able to be comfortable with that. I've done trainings with 50 plus people and webinars. I do them every other week, really, at the software company I work at. And I think a lot of those skills like storytelling and things like that were learned in Waldorf that I think are really valuable. All the other things like the dates and, learning how to different phases in mathematics and science. I think that stuff's kind of a lot easier to learn, but some of those skills you get in Waldorf are a lot harder, and they're given to you naturally through the curriculum there. So I would just say that that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's
Oh,
been
thank
my
you.
experience, what I
Thank you.
remember. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Fiona or Lucas, do either of you have, any experiences or lessons in particular that you feel prepared you well for high school or beyond?
Yeah, I'll go after you.
Um, Okay. So what I found that was the most helpful is like confidence. That was the biggest thing that Waldorf taught me. And it's not in the sort of like I'm super outgoing and can talk to anyone way. It's more in like the public speaking and like ability to be wrong in school. Like at my school, they really like in high school they emphasize public speaking. So like the ability to get up in front of a couple hundred people and just speak and things like that. Like that has was something that Waldorf taught you since first grade, getting up on stage to do plays and performances without the fear that comes from like apprehension of judgment or criticism of others. So that was something that really helped me, like with the transition into high school, having to be around more people and in a bigger environment that could be difficult. I know that a lot of my classmates at my current school do struggle with being able to speak in front of a crowd, like with that, the fear that comes with that. But I found that I don't have that issue, and that has really helped me to be able to do presentations in school or for the entire school. Like going up on stage doesn't scare me. And that's something that I can definitely attribute to Waldorf because I know my class, we had our own lines from first grade. Like we had to speak on our own on stage. And numerous times per year, we would go and do a presentation, like whether it was singing, playing an instrument, doing a play, anything like that. They really emphasized like that public speaking and just doing it as well as with like the presentations we would do in class. Like it wasn't a PowerPoint where you had all your speaker notes at Waldorf. It was you create something and you present it in front of your class. So having that like foundation in this whole like public speaking has really like helped me in high school when I have to like create a minutes long presentation to give to my class on a subject that I'm not 100% like, I'm not an expert on it, but doing the research to get that has really helped. And I know Waldorf, like just the confidence it brought me has just been incredible for high school.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
Simon, I think you touched on this, but looking back, what really blows me away is the amount of things we did at Waldorf, from cross-country skiing in the winter to ballroom dancing and gym class and gymnastics. And now the number one thing my family tells me today is you have your, hand in too many pies. You're doing too many things at once. My mom always says I'm a duck because ducks can't fly well and they can't run well. They just do a little bit of everything. But I think one of the things that I learned from Waldorf was curiosity. And now I'm in my 6th semester of college, and I'm taking philosophy of Plato and Aristotle, film photography, and acting 1. So what do those classes have in common together? And then this past summer, I was working a corporate internship at Delaware North downtown. So I think, looking back, you would never see the same person taking those classes and working this job maybe. And in the same way at Waldorf, I could never see myself at any other school in any other situation where I'm going from cross-country skiing, taking off the boots, going to algebra class, and then going to German. And yeah, I look back really fondly on these experiences because now at college, when there's a variety of things you can do on a Thursday or Friday night, whether it's, going to Hispanic club or working in the woodwork studio, Waldorf kind of gives you the confidence to try out all these new things, even though you might be a beginner at all of them. And, that's not too terrifying. And I think, for me, that's one of the most valuable lessons I took away from Waldorf, that confidence to really try anything and be curious about everything.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. I love to hear about, this sense of belonging, this sense of confidence, and this sense of curiosity that all three of you touched on. Thank you so much for sharing. So we've talked about, some wonderful benefits, right? That you feel like you've gotten from your time at Waldorf. And I think, a lot of people are curious to hear, about some challenges, right? There are so many benefits. And I think a lot of us probably who are here tonight gathered together, we know what they are. So I think talking a little bit about some challenges could also be helpful too. So I think, my next question to pose to the group is, what were some academic challenges that you encountered when transitioning to high school or beyond, into college as well?
Yeah.
I can start with that. Or do you want to start?
No, you got it. I already started one. Yeah.
Okay. So I transitioned to high school only less than 3 years ago. And I can say that my situation was unique due to the pandemic.
Right.
But so that in itself proved a challenge. But one of the things that I found most difficult was acclimating to the technology in high school. Currently, we do all of our schoolwork on computers. We write our notes on the computers, and all of our material is through software. So that was difficult to say the least because when I started in high school, I struggled to even get Google open. But I know that Waldorf prioritizes, or at least when I was there, they prioritized a lack of technology, which was great. I think that was really helpful for young kids. I never came home with a headache from Waldorf from staring at a screen for 8 hours a day. But that was something that was a learning curve in high school. I could barely type, and it was almost funny how bad I was at technology, and that was definitely a challenge for me. So the good thing about that being my challenge was it was pretty quick to learn, and I had transitioned a little bit to a computer during Zoom school, the end of my 8th grade year. So, but transitioning into high school, really the only thing that I struggled with was how do I use a computer? Like, how am I supposed to project on a screen? I had no clue. But I'm happy to say that that went away within the first month of high school. And other than that, Waldorf really did prepare me, like course load and other things such as that. Like, I was fully prepared for the rigor of high school.
Now, Fiona, I'm kind of curious, you know, when you mentioned struggling with technology and using a computer, right? You started high school during a pandemic where everything was on a computer for the most part. Who do you feel like was really helpful in supporting you through that transition and teaching you or supporting you in learning? Was it mostly your peers? Was it your teachers at your high school?
Yes, it was the teachers at my high school. They were very understanding when I couldn't, like, they walked me through, this is how you open OneNote. This is how you start a Google Doc. This is how you change the font on the Google Doc. The teachers were very understanding, and I also made a bunch of good friends within the first couple weeks of school, many of whom were just incredibly talented with computers, like in computer science at the end of their first year of high school. So having those people to lean on was really helpful. And like just being able to ask people for help in that way was something that was, it made it easy when I was having such a difficult time with something as simple as like typing, which now seems like second nature, but back then it was a real challenge for me.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you for sharing. Simon or Lucas?
Yeah, I can kind of build off that a little bit from my transition from Waldorf to Canisius. We got iPads instead of computers. And I remember 7th and 8th grade year at Waldorf, I was pretty sure I would be going to Canisius. And at the time, all the freshmen would get an iPad, and that's how they do their schoolwork. So I was ready to jump in. You know, having my own iPad, this was something to really look forward to, and having my own screen, all this stuff. But after about the first few months, that wore off pretty quickly. And, you know, it was just another device. But in the same way, they went through a whole curriculum and sort of module on how to use the applications that you need to know how to use. And basically taught us as if we had known nothing. It was our first time seeing an iPad, which was pretty useful. And sort of a tangent that was important to me was that there was no video games in my house growing up. And during the time around high school, I was getting to the age where I could have gotten video games if I wanted to. I was starting to get that autonomy. But at that point, the time had passed for that desire. So I was old enough where I didn't really desire it anymore. But my friends who had started playing when they were in middle school loved it up to that point. And for me, it was just, you know, more free time to run or to bike or do whatever other clubs I was in high school. But I think bringing it back more to academics, at Waldorf, I was never a good reader. I always struggled with reading. We would have reading time, and I remember I would just kind of stare, you know, blankly at the page. So I ended up getting tutoring on the side while I was at Waldorf, and that was a concern of Mrs. Hamlin's, my teacher. But today, I'm a political science major, which is very reading and writing intensive. Probably reading some of the densest texts.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I think I was kind of able to learn these things with time. And the most important thing was learning time management, because I think rightfully so, Waldorf never taught us how to manage our time. What we were being taught was how to be kids, how to, use our imagination and have fun with just a ball and our boots in the mud. But, we didn't learn how to block out our day and do all this sort of stuff, which I don't regret. But getting to high school, that was one of the most important things I grabbed on to pretty quickly.
Thank you, Lucas, for sharing. Simon, was technological sort of difficulties and an academic challenge for you? Did you have any other academic challenges in the adjustment back to high school, or?
Yeah, the only thing that I think was probably really different from me than the other two folks here is the like as Fiona was talking about, like I do remember I took a keyboarding class before I joined um Waldorf, and I still remember like A, S, D, F, J, K, L, SEM, like from my keyboarding class, like what pattern your fingers lay down on the keyboard. And so I feel like I definitely had a leg up on that potentially because I did do that course before I was over at Waldorf at 5th grade. But as far as like learning the technology, like I'm glad, it's really nice that we have a different audience, because some of the things Fiona was mentioning, I don't even remember, but now she's jogging my memory. Like, oh yeah, when I went into high school, I remember, we would be in the library and you have to do like bibliographies and cite your sources and learn how to import and export citations on the computer and things like that. But as I was thinking about it, like, I don't even know that some of those things would have been, a large portion more difficult for someone from Waldorf than a public middle school. Like, I think it was definitely harder, I think, probably from someone from Waldorf, but some of those technologies, like, yeah, you move over to high school and then you have a different teacher, they use a different, they use a different technology or want it in a different format, and that will be a learning curve regardless where you come from. But it was probably definitely a bit more difficult from Waldorf, but yeah, I don't really feel like I had a ton of challenges. Like, it probably sounds cliche and overstated, but I really do think that, Waldorf did give me, more confidence to ask for help and things like that. Like, not everyone's gonna, the irony here is that you might not have learned the keyboarding classes or things like that, but it does give you confidence. Whereas in a public school, people might not have the self-esteem or confidence. They will be more worried, that they get, denied, or they don't have the, or feeling of rejection. So they don't want to ask like a librarian or one of their peers for help. Whereas I feel like, I did feel like I had that. I was just like, oh, people are going to help. And if someone doesn't help, then I'll try to find out a better way to ask it so that I do get the help I need. I'll see that it was like persistence, right? Like, I'll see this guidance counselor, I'll see this one. Okay, well, I'll try that one. Well, I'll ask my friend, like, what guidance counselor do you see? It just really, I don't remember it being a huge challenge
Yeah.
personally. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it kind of makes me sort of reflect for a moment on like the social and interpersonal skills that are
Mhm.
such a foundation to Waldorf, teaching and
Yeah.
learning. And although there might have been, I think in our ages or grades, a little bit of a technological gap that we needed to bridge and learn about, transitioning into high school and higher education. I think there's such a strength of the social and interpersonal skills, the ability to communicate your needs or wants or
Oh,
what
yeah.
you needed to learn, whether that was with peers or parents or teachers or whomever. So I'm happy that like all three of you kind of touched on that. Speaking of kind of the social and interpersonal, I'm curious to just ask, this next question here, kind of, I'm wondering if the three of you can share a little bit about what the social transition was like, to high school or beyond, the social kind of adjustment.
Yeah, I can kick this one off. I think the social adjustment from Waldorf to high school was probably the toughest thing for me. More difficult than the academic adjustment. And I think that was because I wasn't the stereotypical homeschooler that was awkward, going to high school and then you have to talk to people, which I don't think is completely true regardless. But it was more so the opposite, where after 8 years with the same classmates, sort of felt like they were family in a way. And going into high school, I was looking for the same thing. And then, all of a sudden you're thrown into a mixing pot for me with 200 kids, and then trying to search for that same family of 8, 9, or 10 kids, and who are going to be these 9 people that are going to be beside me every day, and I'm going to really get to know them well and their families, and visit them on the weekends and go biking with them and do all this sort of stuff. And I kind of learned that my expectations were maybe a little bit too high, jumping in right away, looking for this sort of family. But thankfully I was able to join the track team, which was sort of a remedy for me there. And I found myself running 6 or 7 miles every day after school with a small group of 4 people, and getting to talk to them for 50 minutes straight on these runs and really getting to know them. And that's where I was, really able to find what I was looking more so for there. But yeah, I would say in some ways it wasn't until junior year where I kind of really found my friends for the good, and the friends I still stay in touch with today. So I think that could kind of be interesting. And the social challenges of going into high school can maybe be some of the most difficult parts transitioning. And I think that can go for any student from any middle school.
Yeah.
But for me specifically, I didn't know anyone going into Canisius as well. I was one of one, and there was one Waldorf alum who was 4 years older than me, but that played a role as well, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Simon or Fiona,
I can go next.
share? Great.
Okay, so for me, again, I'm probably going to go back to this numerous times, but COVID definitely made my freshman year weird. So going into freshman year, I did know a couple people. There were 2 other girls from my Waldorf class. My graduating class was only 9, so I was super close to everyone. And I had 2 good friends who decided to go to STEM, where I am still in school, but neither of them stayed through. They both left before December of freshman year. So that kind of left me with like a pool of friends who I didn't really know anyone. Like I knew them because we all lived in the same area, but I didn't know anyone well. So the good thing for me, the I guess blessing in disguise of COVID was we were all sort of floundering, having not completed a full 8th grade year, like without the closure of 8th grade, we were all kind of in the same boat. So I got to be pretty good friends with a lot of people just because we were all looking for friends. And the social like groups in my school still probably haven't quite figured themselves out, even though we're almost completely through junior year. And one of the best things was my school right now, our class is only around 40 kids. So I can be very close to a lot of them, like know them really well and be able to be friends with everyone. I know everyone's name, I know a lot about everyone because it's such a small class. And from that, like the social aspect, I did get a lot out of it because I know a lot of the girls in my class. STEM is an all-girls school. So I know everyone quite well at this point. And we've gone on a lot of class like retreats to just deepen that connection and become closer friends, which is really great because being in an all-girls school, it can get very like cliquey. But I think that having the joint like experience of going into high school and not knowing really what's going on helped everyone just form these friendships that probably will last for a really long time. And I know that like I've ebbed and flow with who my closest friends are in high school. And that's been an interesting thing just to see how our dynamics shift as we change courses and just find the sports that we truly love. Like I know for me as well, cross country. I was the only one who joined the cross country team my freshman year, so that allowed me to be friends with the older students, and a couple of Waldorf alums were also on the team. So I was able to like know them, be their friend, and through meeting the girls on the team, I was able to meet other people in other grades. So I'm not confined to just my own grade. I'm friends with the freshmen, the seniors, sophomores, everyone. And I think Waldorf just helped with like my ability to be confident enough to talk to someone who's 2 years older than me, have conversations like with someone who might be significantly younger than me. And it's just really helped me to be able to just make these friendships. And personally, the friendships I made at Waldorf are some of my like dearest friends. Like um, my class was it was 8 of us were girls and we had 1 boy. So I'm quite close to all of them still, even though I haven't seen a couple of them in years, but we still text and are still connected. And yeah, I think that's pretty important to me.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like something that the two of you have just highlighted, stepping into a high school where, you don't know that many people or you don't know anyone at all, or, there's some barriers in place with COVID. It sounds like the two of you did a really wonderful job of focusing in on things that you were interested in and using, hobbies or interests or sports or leisure activities to sort of be able to meet people in a way that was a smaller group, right? Where you knew that you were going to be meeting people with similar interests, so that's really wonderful. Simon, would you like to share a little bit about just the social adjustment for you, if there was one, or transition, from Waldorf to high school?
Yeah, no, I already did, honestly. We could go to the next question. I mean, for me, I had a great transition. I did have a couple friends, like I said, Sean Phillips, Arlo Di Pasquale, they were both in my class that I remained friends with and both went to my high school. So I felt like I kind of had a jump start there, but there were things that, Sean didn't do that I wanted to do, things that Arlo didn't do that I wanted to do. So I made other friends for other areas of my life kind of thing. And so I definitely, I'm still very close with Arlo, close with Sean, but yeah, no, it was a good transition and I made new friends. But I can definitely understand Lucas's points and Fiona's, like to Lucas's points, it's definitely, you are used to having people that you really know like the back of your hand, and then you go into a school and you're like, oh well, these people I'm with for one class, and then it's other people for for the next class. And um, I think you don't necessarily trust them too the same way. You're used to having people who you know really well and you trust really well, and so you might be kind of there's definitely that dynamic as well. But
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. I'm just going to, I think, wrap us up with one final question here, and then we will transition to the Q&A portion. So we'll keep this last question kind of short and efficient. But I'm kind of curious to hear from the three of you, I'd love to hear what you are most proud of from your school experience at AWS. And, if there's not anything that sticks out as something that you are extremely proud of being, a part of, maybe there's something that you just loved being a part of during your time at AWS.
I could share for this one. For me personally, I think it's just the interpersonal skills and the communication skills. Like, Fiona was saying earlier, like you have plays, so you're comfortable acting in front of really big groups. and you're comfortable, interacting with all your classmates. But like, there's a lot of vulnerability, I would say, and I think that is something I'm really proud of. It's definitely carried into my career. I've been super willing to take chances. Like, I moved to Boston and I didn't know anyone in Boston. So I just moved there for a job. I wasn't planning to, I was planning on working remotely. But when I got to Boston, the CEO of the company said, this offer is contingent on you moving over here. And I just moved. I didn't really worry. And I ended up becoming very close friends with my neighbor who lived above me in the apartment I was renting. But I kind of just made it work. And then I really enjoyed that. I traveled a lot for work. I used to travel every month to San Francisco to lead a software training to all the different consulting companies that use our product. It's Salesforce. And so yeah, I think being comfortable to present in front of really big groups of like 30 people early on in my career that all had more experience than I did. Some people are very, like computer science developers, other people are business executives. There's like a lot of, people asking questions, curveball questions in the middle of the training and things like that. So being able to like think on your feet and then communicate effectively, and do that and kind of take those risks. I don't think that I would have been that willing to do all of that stuff, and I would have been, more in my own bubble if I didn't go to Waldorf. So yeah, I think it gave me a lot of confidence and esteem to do all that, and the interpersonal skills, all of that. So I think that's my favorite experience from Waldorf.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear you reflect on all of that and just hear about how all of those skills have translated like into your career. That's really
They
fantastic.
paid off, and the woodworking I do, I'll send a link actually to my website in here, but
Oh,
I
please.
built most all our furniture in our house, and it's a good outlet that I enjoy outside of work. And I don't know if I mean, I didn't do that in high school, so it wasn't like it was directly from woodworking. But I do remember Miss Lux in woodworking, who we did all of our project. We made stools, we made like tools for outside. You're supposed to use all like, hands and not use like power tools. So
Right.
it's amazing.
That's really something fantastic to be proud of. So thank you for sharing. Fiona and Lucas, is there anything that stands out for you, something that you're most proud of from your school experience or that you just loved being a part of at AWS?
Yeah, for me, I think going off what you said about woodworking, one thing I look back on really fondly is the woodworking, and specifically the woodwork parties. I don't know if you had those when you were at Waldorf, but
I did it.
yeah, we would have these nights where everyone would bring food. Mrs. Lux would stay in late, and we'd work until midnight on our projects, play music, and we actually organized one for New Year's Eve. And then in the gym, we lowered a little basketball at midnight. Some incredible stuff like that I'll never forget. And today I'll go thrift shopping and I'll buy a pair of 12-inch shorts that just don't fit me at all. I'll bring them home knowing that I'm going to hem them up and walk around, and my friends see blue shorts with yellow hems, and they're like, what's going on with your shorts? And it's the best thing to be able to tell them, I like in part made these. We have a woodwork studio at school where I was able to make a small coffee table, framing photos. I don't think I would ever have the confidence or wherewithal to go in there, not having some experience in the back end. And the plays as well. For the first time since 8th grade, I'm taking an acting class, and they're asking at the beginning of the course, do you have any experience in acting? And I'm saying, yes, I do actually. And thinking back to these experiences, Mrs. Hamlin being a director and really applying this stuff to my life today. And I mean, it's tough to place my finger on one thing or experience that I'm most proud of from Waldorf, but I think it comes through in my speech, just how excited I am about these experiences that we were all able to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's those, you're listing off some really incredible life skills that are just going to carry with you, you know, forever. And I think, you know, you placed a little emphasis on, you know, the plays and the productions, right? Specifically, probably the higher grades, right? They get so intricate and so you know, purposeful and well done in 7th and 8th grade, right? The productions, the full length productions that are done at Waldorf. I think it's something absolutely to be really proud of, to look back on the practice and the patience and the discipline that those, especially those higher grade, you know, plays and productions took. Fiona,
Yeah.
what about you? Oh, Lucas, would you like to add anything?
No, that's good. I was just agreeing.
Yeah.
Well, for me, well, the funny thing is, woodworking, I also loved that. Sadly, my stool is still just a pile of legs in the corner of my room. But that was definitely a fond memory. For me though, it was really just learning to be unapologetically myself, like not worrying about like what other people thought, because I was in a class of, as it was mostly girls, we were just so comfortable within ourselves, like and each other, that it really just translated into the rest of my life, like just being comfortable being who I am and not feeling the need to conform to what other people expect of me, like not feeling the need to be trapped in a social circle, and like being confident enough to just like stand up for what I believe, like in school and just outside of it, and being able to make friends who I think are similar to me and who I enjoy being around, and not feeling like I need to be part of like one social group or another, because in middle school and elementary school we didn't have cliques or anything like that. So being able to just be who I am, have my interests, and not feel like I need to like change what I like because of who I'm with, like not feeling the need to not take the hard classes because my friends don't want to, and like being okay with being the one who has to stay up super late because of like homework or something, because at Waldorf my friends and I, we would FaceTime and do homework late into the night, probably too late sometimes, and get distracted talking to each other. So like that is something that I've carried with me into high school, and I think it's really just, it's important to me to be able to just have what I like and what I believe in, and just not feel the need to conform.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really powerful to hear. Thank you, Fiona. So that pretty much kind of wraps up our prepared questions. You know, I'd love to, you know, switch gears and kind of open up the floor now to any questions we have from attendees, from the audience. And, you know, these questions can be, you know, for a particular panelist. They can just be for the panelists, and all three can answer. And they can really run the gamut of anything, you know, anyone's interested in asking tonight.
I have a question.
Great, thanks.
My name is Tamara Horseman-Rapana. I have a 5th grader at the Waldorf School and a 1st grader, Leo and Anya. My question is advice you might give. Well, first of all, maybe two-part. Did you experience this, and what advice might you give to children who are experiencing this? With children, with friends of children who go to the Waldorf School who maybe don't understand, sorry, cuckoo clock. And with their lack of understanding, it turns to mocking. Your kids who go to a different type of school, what kinds of words might you have for those children who are at the Waldorf School, and how they might handle friends who tease them or think that it's not as rigorous or a real school, those kinds of things.
Great question. Thank you. Would anyone like to take that question or answer?
I
Yeah,
remember. Yeah, go ahead.
okay, yeah. I can speak on one of my experiences that's pretty specific, and maybe provide some insight. So I remember being in Waldorf, maybe in 6th or 7th grade, in the back of my friend's car. One friend who went to Waldorf, one didn't. It was the three of us. And I remember hearing the mom talk, and she was telling a story about how her son was hanging out with someone else. And, the details are a little bit muddled, but some conflict arose or some event was coming. And the mom basically said that this friend was basically not on the same social level as her son, as if it was a sort of race to kind of join these cliques that sort of form in high school and start this game early in middle school, and be classified on a certain level. And even though I was only in 6th or 7th grade at the time, those words kind of rung out to me, almost as a red flag that, something's wrong. And yeah, my first thought was that, children in middle school and high school and beyond should never be seen as, at different levels in their social development in this way. And it kind of made me more proud that I did go to a Waldorf school and that I wasn't involved in all this, kind of social hierarchy and social development and, being tied up in this kind of stuff, because it never crossed my mind at Waldorf. It didn't exist. And it really made me thankful for that in the moment. Yeah, so I guess no one really had to remind me or reassure me of that when I was at Waldorf, because it was something I was pretty, self-reassured about. But I think, if someone were to be struggling with that, I would say that, basically what I just told them, it's kind of a privilege to be removed from that stuff up until high school. And, going into high school, I think leading into what Fiona talked about a lot, it gave me a lot more confidence in who I was.
I have a sort of different perspective on this. It made me, because I'm a little younger or something, but for me, I mean this in the best way possible. Waldorf is a weird school. I mean that in like a very nice way, but it's very much unlike any other school. So for me, like no one understands Waldorf, and in high school, I'll sometimes say just a random thing that I know how to do thanks to Waldorf, like, oh yeah, I can juggle. Like that's a weird thing. I'll say that to someone and they'll be like, what? So when I was younger, I would just basically, I would not let those comments about Waldorf being a weird school hurt me, because it is. And like having kids who make fun of Waldorf, that is a problem with them and not with the kid who goes to Waldorf. So I would just make it into a joke, honestly. That's what I would always do. They would say something about Waldorf, and I'd just be like, well, yeah, but also we get to do this incredible thing that you probably don't ever know how to do. Like, I can sew pajamas. Can you do that? Because Waldorf teaches you these skills that no one else knows how to do. Or just like, we use saws in woodwork. What do you guys use all the time? When Waldorf gives you these skills that no other school does, and things like using a computer will come with time, but something like knowing how to knit or crochet, I don't know many people who can do that. And a lot of my friends in high school are struggling to learn how to knit a scarf at like 15 or 17 years old when we were doing that at 6. So I think just remembering and like, I don't know, having little kids remember that their experience at Waldorf is unique and it's a good thing that it is.
I feel like for me, I do remember also getting like I definitely got picked on a bit. I think in gym class, like I was always the last kid to get picked. I was not really a jock. I was much more creative. And I was not a sports person. My dad was never into sports, so I didn't follow sports teams. I was not. It was always like, oh, we'll trade you Simon and 3 other people for one person from your team. I was like, a part of a person in gym class. And that was kind of rough. I never liked that, but I think like a lot of it for me getting over any times being picked on, things like that, like I had some self-esteem from Waldorf where to Fiona's point, like I knew that I had a different background. I learned a lot of things that these other kids didn't. But I think my mom also really helped me get through a lot of that because, I had a very open communication line with my mom. So I would say as like a parent for parents, just in general, that, um, obviously this is probably always preaching to the choir here, but it's something I think about with when I have my kids. I hope to have my kids. Is just making sure that I have that first off, obviously the kid is already comfortable enough to say, "Hey, I'm being picked on," and to funnel that upward that it's happening. But like I remember my mom telling me if I ever told her instances of me being picked on, my mom would just tell me like, that kid's gonna have major issues kind of growing up, and like right or wrong maybe that wasn't the right approach. I'm not saying she put them down, but I do think it helps like reassure the child. At least it helped me. She would say, you know, that kid's going to be leagues behind you when you're an adult. Like you're already operating as an adult. You're way ahead of them. That person might be in a better grade than you, or be picked quicker in gym class or something. But like the things you're focusing on are like way further than them. Like you're more like a college kid, who doesn't care about any of that, and you don't need any of that reassurance. And I think just like her reassurance and telling me that really, it was like, okay, well, I respect my mom a lot more than I respect like this bully or whoever's ever picking on me. And then I thought higher of myself too. Like I really did think that I was like operating at her level. With my friends, like I always had conversations with their parents, their moms and dads, and just felt like more like an adult. And then I just realized, I'm like, all right, well, it doesn't matter if I'm getting picked on, I think, over time, because I did truly believe I was like, further than this person. I don't need to succumb to this level of, back and forth, bullying kind of with them. So that's kind of my experience personally.
Yeah, I think to chime in as well, I was thinking of this while you're talking. At a certain point, the narrative shifts. So maybe when you're in middle school at Waldorf, comparing yourself to other friends,
Yeah.
they're learning algebra, they're working on computer, they're doing all this cool stuff, and you're learning how to juggle. Oh, so weird, right? But then all of a sudden it shifts once you get
Yes.
to high school. And you get to high school and you tell your friends, yeah, guess what I had to do to graduate from 8th grade? I had to learn how to juggle and do 14 pull-ups. And they're like, no way, that's incredible. That's awesome. And I mean, the list goes on about all the unique stuff. And all of a sudden, this is something really cool that makes you unique. So yeah, I think thinking about that long game is important.
Yeah, I think if you could just push through some of those bullying experience, things like that, like it totally pays off. I agree, Lucas. Like afterwards, the narrative does shift, and then you're like leagues ahead of at your other people and it's not a competition. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas, for that point. Like I honestly hadn't pinpointed that before, but there's so much of a truth and reality to that. I do think, when you're younger, this education might appear a certain way, but into adulthood, I think like across the board, making new friends as an adult, or having friends as an adult, who are not familiar with Waldorf education or the experience, they are so wowed, by what this experience is like, and I think, there's never mocking, but rather oftentimes, some envy for what this education and what this experience, looks like. I think that's typically much more common, or overall curiosity and interest. Oh, well, tell me more, maybe I should send my kids there, I think that's a much more common narrative than mocking. So it sounds like the three of you are kind of offering, some ideas to think about here, self-compassion, right? Reminding yourself that everyone comes from different backgrounds. Fiona, you kind of offered the reflection to, maybe infuse the situation with some humor, right? Accept the weirdness and the uniqueness of Waldorf. And Simon, you kind of offered this point around, reassurance, right? Lots of children do have insecurities, and oftentimes those insecurities are projecting outward, right? And that might be causing some of the mocking. So thank you so much for that question. From the audience, do we have any other questions tonight? Just gonna kind of look through here.
I have a question.
Great, thank you.
My question is, so going through the school at Waldorf School, you guys didn't have as many tests as any other usual kids go through public school? Because I hear how many tests are taken already, kids going through the 4th grade, through my oldest peers, and for our kids, they're not gonna get into that experience. How did you experience that, like when you actually went into high school and now you have to deal with those tests? Was it too crazy? Was it very easy for you guys?
Great question, thank you.
Yeah.
I can say that oh, sorry, do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Honestly, it wasn't hard. Tests are just annoying to me. Like there was nothing about taking tests that was difficult, because at Waldorf we learned how to actually learn material. And I think that has really helped me, instead of just learning for a test and like just memorizing to be able to spit it out on a piece of paper the next day. I learned how to understand concepts and like build on them, like for math, like for my experience right now, like for math, I know how to do it, and I don't have to go over a million practice problems. So I get the formula down and I just spew that out on a piece of paper. I actually understand what I'm doing. And it's the same thing with history and like English. It's learning how to do the work in a way that works for your brain, and not have to just memorize. I think that's one of the things Waldorf taught, is like not how to be a good test taker, just how to be a good learner. And I think that just teaches you how to take tests.
Right, it pays dividends for taking tests and for testing, right? Yeah. Lucas or Simon?
Yeah, so I've never been the best test taker, but yeah, I remember I was always able to connect with my teachers very well. So after class, I don't know, I would find myself in office hours or getting extra help when I needed it. And that always helped out a lot. But yeah, I think I misinterpreted the question at first. So, but yes, tests weren't too bad in high school. I asked for a lot of help, and I found that I adjusted pretty quickly.
Yeah, I remember we had lesson plans in Waldorf, and you had to write and draw stories about like what you learned. So it was like draw a picture of this scene kind of that what you and then I remember writing essays too, like to show our teacher that we knew what material he had just taught us. And I found that like a lot harder, at least from my memory. I mean, I think like, you know, in high school, the hardest part was, yeah, probably for me, it was remembering like dates and things like that, but it was really just memorization. So yeah, um, it was very doable.
Yeah.
We also had, to add on to my answer, it was kind of hollow. We had a spelling quiz every Friday. I'm not sure if every teacher does this at Waldorf, but I would remember Thursday and usually Friday morning on the bus, taking this list of spelling words and studying for it, trying to cram it all in. And then pretty quickly I learned when I got to high school, you can't do this. It's not sustainable. But I found out that, all right, basically I have spelling quizzes in 3 different classes this week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I just have to prepare for them in advance. And, you know, that'll be that. It ramped up a little bit. And, you know, everyone found a way to deal with it. So I don't think it was too bad.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just share from my experience too, because I think, you know, I went to a public high school and there was a lot of immediate test taking right after the transition, just tests all around. So I had to learn, you know, quickly how to work with Scantron and you know, just integrate testing and you know, studying for test taking into the academic picture. It was an adjustment, but I think it was very, it was easy to work with. And I do think like Fiona's point of, you know, I think learning comprehension, how much of a focal point that is to the Waldorf education pays so many dividends for then later needing to study for tests and take tests. Any other questions from the audience tonight? We've just got a few more moments here. Hoping to wrap up on time at 7:30, but we've got plenty of time for another question.
I just want to say something quickly.
Yes.
So my teacher, Mrs. Gomez, is on this call, and she just she sent me a direct message on here, and honestly, that just made my day. So Mrs. Gomez, I'm so happy you're on this call. I didn't notice that you were there because I'm not in the view where I can see everyone. But I just have to say that the relationship that Waldorf builds with your teachers is truly something that is incredibly special. Mrs. Gomez was my teacher from 2nd through 8th grade, and truly my favorite teacher I've ever had.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you for sharing that. Hi, Megan.
Sorry, now I'm crying. Actually, I told Fiona before that what I said in my message that she made me cry. So I just love hearing not just my students, but all of the Waldorf students speak about their time after Waldorf, having a brother and sister who are also graduates of this school. It's a very familiar and just a lovely way to talk about this beautiful and wonderful education. So, and I have to echo what Fiona said, the relationships that not just me, the class teacher, but all of the teachers, all of the subject teachers, even the nurse. Sometimes my 4-year-old always develops the best relationship with the nurse for some reason, or my 5-year-old. So that is one thing that I think is super special, not just for the students who attend the school, but also the teachers who we feel called to share our lives with you and your families and this community. It's something that every teacher at the school feels, that their place is at that school and with the community and with you. So the royal you of all of you, not just the 3. So anyway, I don't want to take up any more time, but thank you so much for giving back to our community as alumni, and tell your friends to do that as well. I would love to have so many of your stories just captured and able to read and share whenever we need something to give to future parents, because every time I hear a story from a Waldorf student or a Waldorf parent, it's just a beautiful moment that I'm happy they shared with me. So thank you.
Thanks, Megan. I just want to kind of, I don't know if everyone can see the meeting chat, but I'm just going to read 2 final questions that came in. One question, is actually for Lucas, but I think Lucas potentially left the call. But the question was, Lucas mentioned needing a tutor for reading during his time at AWS. Could he elaborate? Was the tutor through the school or outside?
Kayla, I can probably answer that. I believe that he received tutoring outside of the school. At that particular time, we didn't have the support system that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have gotten a little extra help in school, but generally tutoring was happening outside. Oh, there he is.
Oh, here he is. Hi,
And now you could tell me I'm wrong, Lucas.
Yeah, so my computer cut out a little bit there, but I think there was a question about tutoring from inside and outside
Yes.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can speak about that a little bit. So basically, Mrs. Hamlin at the time noticed that my reading was poor and my writing was poor. So my mom works for the Buffalo Public School. We had some eye into the resources available. So I started once a week sessions at Buffalo Hearing and Speech for both reading and writing. And I'm not sure, I think this is true, but Mrs. Hamlin told my mom in about 2 months that my writing had drastically changed. I was now among the middle to the top of the class within Waldorf. And that helped out a lot. Now I'm a political science major, and I do some writing for Running Magazine in Boston here and there. So yeah, I've made it out decently all right.
I would say so. I think that's you're putting it humbly. Any other questions for the panelists tonight?
Well, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say that I am so happy that I was able to come this evening, and it's wonderful to see all 4 of you who I taught, and am so proud of what you're doing, and it's just so fabulous to see you all. So thank you for participating, and it's just great. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That's so nice to hear. And yeah, I would just like to thank everyone so much for coming tonight. I mean, this has been really, really fantastic. You know, obviously a special thank you to all of our amazing panelists, Lucas, Simon, and Fiona. Thank you so much, you know, just for participating tonight and for sharing like what you've been up to since Waldorf. Thank you also to the attendees, our audience here on Zoom. Thank you so much for coming and engaging tonight and asking, you know, some really wonderful questions. And thank you so much for making this such a great event. And, you know, I think I can speak on behalf of Aurora Waldorf School and just say that we hope at future events and connect soon in the future.
Yeah, it's a really lovely school. I would say that you should definitely send your kids if they're not already. I didn't join this because I didn't want to push for it. I mean, you know, I joined because I want everyone to have the same experience I had. It's really, really special. So, and any questions, if anyone has any questions, like you can funnel them through the Waldorf School and Kayla and everyone
Absolutely.
else. But my door is open personally if anyone has anything. So
Thank you.
hope for the best for everyone.
Thank you
Great
so
meeting
much.
everyone. Thank you so much, Kayla.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Bye. Thanks all.